Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm Angela, and here on a not so sunny day, but just a happy day despite all of it, because I have with me Brheanna Myers, and she is the founder of Light and Breezy Coaching and the creator of the Awaken Your Potential Method. After a near death experience in 2020 that radically transformed her life, she dedicated herself to helping others navigate spiritual awakening, release energetic blocks, and connect with their higher self. As a certified QHHT, which is Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique practitioner, she's also an energy healer and spiritual coach. She guides clients through powerful experiences such as past life regressions, DNA activations, and subconscious healing. Her work blends practical psychology with deep spiritual tools, helping people move through awakening symptoms, trauma, and transformation so they can fully step into their purpose. Today, she joins us to share her story and explore how we can all awaken our potential and live from higher consciousness. I love all of that. I can't wait to
Oh,
talk to you about it.
yes. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being
So
here.
excited to be here.
Yeah. And so, wow, you had a near death experience,
hmm
and this was the transformation. And I love it because that's what this podcast is all about. It's about transformation that happens through loss. Can you share a little bit, about what happened there and then how it got you on this path?
Yeah. Now, I would say that this was my big kicker, but my spiritual awakening probably started more in like 2017, where I started questioning like all of my reality. And so when in 2020 we had COVID happen, and I got fungal pneumonia from wearing masks because we were breathing in bacteria, and so I ended up getting a fungus in my lungs. But I had gone to the hospital 3 times that week, and they didn't do anything other than test me for COVID because that was kind of what was going on at that time. And so I ended up collapsing in my home and got rushed to the ER and ended up dying for 6 minutes. And so
Oh,
when that happened, I remember like exiting like out of my body, and I remembered like being completely detached from that body. Like it's funny because I do a lot of work with people that are like, oh, I'm afraid of death because my kids are here, and I'm like, nope. It's like I stepped out and it was like that was a car, right? So I realized like the attachment we have in our 3D reality is actually quite opposite of what happens when we cross over. It was like everything came flooding back to me. Like I remembered, that we were not separate from anything. It was like unconditional love just like whooshed over me. And then I had a very interesting a girl that I know of in this world, in this life. I don't know her well, but she's the daughter of a man that I knew in like middle school and high school. So I've only met her once in my entire life, so I'm not really sure why she was the messenger. And she's alive in this world, but she basically told me that I had a exit clause in my soul contract, and that I would be able to go home with her at that time, or I would step into my spiritual journey when I came back. And then I was like kind of brought into this like quantum web, and I saw the quantum field and how everything was connected. And like I have gone through a insane amount of trauma. I always tell people, I'm like, if I tell them my story in detail, they're just like, what? So, but I saw how all of that was connected to get me to that exact moment for me to be there, to have that decision or that shift in my reality and my consciousness. And so that to me, I tell people I'm kind of a determinist, as far as like I don't believe in free will as much as we give it credit. I think that we made choices before we came here, because I'm also an astrologer, so I could track people's charts so deeply that I'm like I can pinpoint in my own chart. I pinpoint like every major event in my life to transition, and I'm like, I don't think there's nearly as much free will as we think, which is great because it takes a lot of pressure off of us when you
hmm.
really think about that. Because like things, you're here to observe, right? So you're not here to make the choices. You've already made the choices, right? Now we're here to observe and witness and
Right.
to evolve. right? So
Mhm.
yeah, so that's kind of what happened. There was a lot of more details that happened. I saw sacred geometry kind of whooshed through my body, or what would have been my body, but what it wasn't actually a body. But that's how I got into DNA activations. I basically came out of that, and one of the first people I met was a DNA activator herself, and I was like, oh, sacred geometry, and it just like all clicked, and it was like this, just it all cascaded into all these different modalities that I teach now, and that I am a practitioner of. So yeah, it's all
Wow.
connected.
Wow. Yeah, and they talk about, us having this wisdom and knowledge already in us, right? And us being able to, I guess, awaken to that or start to remember that. So that's so cool that you have a lived experience of that. That's so amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and with what I do with quantum healing hypnosis, I actually access your subconscious. So yeah, you're right. It is all in there. Like, you can pull on these memories. They're all in your subconscious. So I always tell people, one of the first things when I start working with someone, I'm like, start listening to subliminals while you're sleeping, because it's 8 hours, hopefully, that your consciousness steps aside, where you can actually reprogram that subconscious, because it's running in the background all the time and actually fueling your thoughts, or what we perceive as thoughts. So one of the best ways just to start moving towards a healthier and more positive thought process, or like positive thinking, is what I teach in my workshop. Is just to reprogram that subconscious, because everything is within you. It's already all there. You know all these things at a deep subconscious level. And when I do hypnosis, often the subconscious will come through and tell my clients exactly that. Like, you already have this instilled in you, or why did we show you this life, is because of this subconscious program that you're running in the background. And so yeah, it's all within us. Every one of us has this, and you have the ability to tap into it, and it's not as difficult as I think a lot of practitioners try to make it sound. I mean, once you start to put the pieces into an order, it's quite simple. When we're kind of taught that meditation, for example, is like, oh,
Yeah.
it's like, no, it's just taking those mindful minutes and just, focusing on your breath, being in the present. I'm sure you've read Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. I mean, just
Mhm.
being in that present moment is the only thing that really matters, because the future is not unfolded yet. The past is gone. This is the only thing we have right here, right now.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so funny. It's so simple and yet so difficult to stay in
Yes.
that present moment. Like, I read Eckhart Tolle. I know this, and yet I will flip out of the present moment at any given time and be there forever.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. What I do is I always set up routines on this stuff. I'm like, and you'll
Mm.
start to eventually catch yourself moving out of that. And of course, we're always going to worry about things. We're human. We have human, problems. But just starting to create a routine in your mind to catch it when you start to overthink the future. That's a big one. Everybody has so much anxiety. It's like, if we just kind of don't overthink the future, because we really, and again, I'm a determinist. So it's like, you don't have as much control of this future that you think you might have. And so you put too much pressure on yourself, and you forget to live the experience. And when you kind of take that pressure off of yourself, it becomes a lot easier to stay within the moment. It's like, well, I mean, obviously, always move with intention. I always tell people, like, move with intention, but release the outcome, because it's going to happen the way it's going to happen. I kind of also tell people, I'm like, if we were all out here making just willy-nilly decisions all day, think about all the things that had to happen for all of us to get to where we were, and the synchronicities and the alignments and things like that. That you're being guided so much more than you really realize. Like, even the thoughts that come in your head, I always tell people, Mike, have you ever thought something and we're like, why did I think that? Well,
Mm.
then who thought to think that thought, right? So you're channeling, but we've been taught by society that channeling is demonic, and it's which is wild to me, because isn't that like what Moses did, and what all these people that connected to the divine? But yet, if somebody else is saying that they can do this, then it's evil. And so we're limiting ourselves by fear of how powerful we can be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit more about the quantum healing hypnosis technique.
Yeah. Um, so there's two parts to it. So first we would do like an interview process. So it takes about 2 hours where you really get to know everyone's like deep story. I want to know I call it the cast of characters, and then what you go through, usually about 3 lives, depends on the level of the significance of that life. And I've had, um, there's one girl, she's told me I could tell a story, but she was a like one of those blue beams in the
Mm.
giant trees, and we hear people now talking about the trees that were cut down and to stop the giants, and so she's telling the story and or tapping into that past life. And then, she was talking about this purple haze that came in the sky that ended them. And, so when you start to hear these things that people couldn't quite possibly know, because she had no idea about that, theory until after she went through the session. So that's just so crazy to me when we start to think about all the things that we hold within our mind that you could just tap into. Anyway, but then we go into the subconscious, which is amazing because I love this part, because while you're in the hypnosis and doing past lives, you still talk of the way of like, I see a tree, or I see a castle, or whatever it is that you see. But then when we go into the subconscious, we're actually connecting to your higher self. And then you start talking in the third person, or you'll be like, Angela needs to work on, her limiting belief of this, and, things like that. Then we can do a full quantum scan and do a full body healing, release blockages. I mean, I've had a lot of people that in the 2 hour interview, I'll recognize a bunch of blockages or limitations that they're carrying, and I can ask as a higher self to release those if it's in their highest good. But everyone that does it's just a very profound experience. I've actually gone through 8 sessions myself. I just love the experience. And um, you know, like for example, when I was a kid, I had a reoccurring dream that I was a Native American, and that I was running from a buffalo, and I get to like, not really a teepee. I don't know the word for it because it wasn't taught in our history books, but it's like a structure. And like I open it and I would like wake up because, I would end up dying, right? The buffalo would trample me or whatever. Well, then I ended up finding, probably when I was like 15 or 16, Dr. Ian Stevenson. Have you heard of him or any of
No.
his stuff? So he was hired by the Vatican to disprove reincarnation. And he ended up studying a lot of these cases in children and things like that. And he ended up becoming one of the authorities in reincarnation because he realized like you can't disprove this. There's like everything points to this being real. Well, he talked a lot about birthmarks. And so I remember him saying that. And what's funny is I have a perfect little circle on my lower back and then one that looks like an exit wound through my stomach. And so I was like, oh my gosh, it was a past life, because I was just learning about these things. I was still like 16 at that time when I discovered that. And then when I started doing my hypnosis, I did my first session. I regressed to that life and realized why I was holding that, because in that lifetime, I was a shaman, and I carry all those shaman traits with me now in this lifetime, but it was being given to me again as a child to remind me like this is your path. And I also at that same time as a child, it's funny because I would totally abandon my childhood abilities, but I had a what we call an imaginary friend. And I mean, to me, she was as real as anybody. And my whole family will tell you this. Like, I would get very upset if you picked on her. Like, well, after my near death experience, I started channeling with my guides. I had 3 that would come forward very often. And then about a year after I started really channeling and then learning my shamanic practice, she finally came forward, and it was Apple Pie. That was her name. And she was basically saying like she had been with me all along, and she didn't come forward right away because she didn't want me to regress into a childhood delusion, and my brain convinced me that I was, you know, having some kind of childhood like trauma delusion. And she's
Right.
like, so I needed you to know that you were able and capable of tapping into these abilities and these energetic frequencies. Really what you're tapping into is different frequencies. And so yeah, so they're all connected, and we have all this within us. And if you go back into your childhood, I guarantee, I always tell my clients, I'm like, if you find the thing you loved when you were a kid or whatever, and that's going to be the passion that will set you free in this lifetime. And you may not even think about it every day, but it's definitely
Yeah.
where you're going to find that passion again.
Yeah, yeah, I truly believe that. And I know that finding that passion and finding what we love to do as kids can really help us in the grieving process because
Yes.
it's a release for emotion and it really helps to revisit all of that and to put ourselves in that space. I mean, if you've ever sat down and just did some, needlework or you've done painting or anything like that, you kind of get into this state where you're just in the flow, in the energy, and it's mindless, right? And it's just it
It's
feels so
self-hypnosis.
good. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You put
yeah.
yourself in a self-hypnosis. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and it's so cool
Yeah.
because a lot of other ideas and things, obviously, you're channeling information that's coming in and yeah, I think it's, something that's lost in society. We are so busy trying to achieve this, that, work,
Hmm.
get the big car, the new house, the whatever. And we forget that there's things that we can do that can bring us joy and and can be really helpful to the rest of the world. Besides, I mean, it's not only for you, but when you change your frequency and your energetic outlook on life, then it ripples out to the world. So it's cool.
100%. I say this on a lot of my different shows. I always say, I'm like, sometimes it's not about you. We're
Yeah.
healing as a collective. And so I tell people all the time, like, your frequency radiates outward, but sometimes when something happens that maybe it hurts us in the process, but it triggers someone on their spiritual journey. And so just being there in that interaction is actually very beneficial to that person, even though you may feel pain from it or it might
Mhm.
hurt you, you're actually just the trigger or the catalyst. And so, yeah, I tell people like, it's not always about us. And that energy that you're radiating is so powerful. And, I would tell people like, go back to your childhood because that's where that energy really was the strongest for you. I also do vortex healing. I don't know if you are familiar with that, but we
Cool.
talk a
Tell me
lot
about
about
that. Hmm.
yeah, so it's channeling the Merlin lineage. And the one thing that we learn a lot about, so I have what we call a vortex in the heart chakra. And but when we incarnate here, we come with karma knots and they come in and we carry them and we are basically dissipating them as we go through these different, challenges in our life. And so I talk a lot about childhood and inner child healing for this reason because we tend to look at ourselves as a child or a teenager or any of that. We kind of close the door because it's painful, or maybe it wasn't pleasant, or maybe you weren't supported, or, whatever limits people from wanting to go back into their childhood. Um, but that's really where the answers are for you because and we kind of talked about this on our emails about the grieving process of that child's still grieving, and they're still having that pain. So going back, and I always tell people like, you became the adult that would have saved you or protected you or that you needed as a child, right? So
Right.
go back to that child. And I actually do this probably once a month. I write letters to my inner child or inner teenager when I start lashing out. Like, you gotta calm down. But I'm like, we're doing so good. I'm so proud of you for sticking it out because that version of you endured so much to get you to where we are. So it's really important to honor that and to really give that acknowledgement, because when we give acknowledgement, then it doesn't carry shame anymore. It carries compassion, and so then we start to look at, you know like if maybe you went through a lot and you made a bunch of mistakes, on the backbone of that. I know I did. um but I have this ability to look back at that version of me and was like, oh, look how strong you were, instead of being like, why were you doing that, right? It's like, well, you were surviving and you were in survival mode, but I never had compassion for myself in the healing or when I was in the hurt stage or the fight or flight stage or survival. And so I always make sure that I kind of take the moments to go back and just like sit with it for a second. I actually have a bunch of different books of just, I have like one for when I was like 5, 10, 15,
Okay.
25. And so I have them where I kind of break it up into different parts of my life that I just go back and honor them, show compassion, because not a lot of people gave me that in my lifetime. So, it's my responsibility in my healing journey to be the one that still, acknowledges that, because, we're all things are happening all at once, right? We think
Mhm.
time is linear, but that energy, I'm a Reiki practitioner. You can go back and heal past energy, right? So if that's
Right.
true, then why would it not be true to write a forgiveness letter or an acknowledgement letter to that past version of yourself, to give that healing, which
Yeah.
only benefits you here in this present space.
Yeah, and I love that you use that letter as a tool to do that because it almost feels like, we tell people have some compassion for yourself and what you've been through. And yet, to just do that, it's a little subjective and maybe hard,
Mm-hmm.
abstract for people to try to do that. But that letter, I feel like that puts it into something more tangible that you can actually relate to a little bit more. So I love that idea. And being compassionate with ourselves is not a normal,
No, it's very
normal
hard.
thing. Yeah.
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 That's probably the hardest. I tell people, like, the hardest person you'll ever have to forgive in your whole life is yourself.
Yeah.
And most people don't even think about the fact that they need to forgive themselves until I say that to them. And then they're like, oh, I'm like, maybe you stayed too long. Maybe you overgave. Maybe you allowed somebody to treat you poorly for a long period of time. Whatever it is, we don't think about that, because a lot of people carry like anger towards like something that happened to us, right? Or
Mhm.
what this person did to us, or whatever the case is. Um, but you can do all the healing you want, but we forget to forgive ourselves for, abandoning ourselves, or, self-sacrificing, whatever it was. So yeah, I think that's a really important. And so I write letters for that reason as well. And sometimes I burn them. I don't always keep them. Sometimes they're ones where, they're just too hard and I need to transmute that energy. So I just,
Mhm.
burn them as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, you know, whole concept of looking back at ourselves. I mean, we get so many opportunities to get insights into that. Every time we're triggered by something, it brings up that emotion and you just want to, I want to say throat punch somebody or, you get that. I'm learning that that's, message for me, that there's some wounding, there's something that's taken place that I haven't resolved. And it's kind of good for me to sit down and write about it. And often
mhm.
then I will understand better where that's coming from. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then there's also even scientific evidence that writing pen to paper actually turns back on neural pathways in your brain that are shut off by trauma or challenging events that happen to you, because our bodies are amazing. Like, we're self-healing, so those neurons and neural pathways will shut down to self-preserve and like hold sanity. So if you actually write, it will flip those back on. And if you know anything about MK Ultra, Kathy O'Brien actually talks about how she reversed MK Ultra through writing, which just shows again that neural pathway. So it actually heals on the brain itself, not just on a spiritual level or energetic level. It really is incredibly powerful. Journaling is always, people are like, if you had to tell me one thing to heal, my journal. I know people are like, I know, and I get people all the time like, are you journaling? They're like, no. I'm like, it's the best thing you can do, because there's so many benefits for it.
Hmm.
And then also even just being able to go back and reread them in the different space that you're in, and to, I get messages from myself all the time because I'll go back and read something and I'll just be like, huh, it perfectly applies with what I'm doing or what my, questions are right now. So,
Right.
we also are automatic writing, and often people think, I'm like, I will to go into automatic writing sessions all the time, and then I'll go back and read and I'm like, I don't even remember writing this, but like, it's very, powerful for what I'm kind of experiencing in that moment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
And that happens easier than people think. I mean, they're like, well, that's good for you. You can do that. But I remember sitting and writing a question to someone. I don't know if it was to Blaine or who. And I just sat and wrote the answer. And then I went back and I read it and I was like, wow, that's really healing. It's really comforting. I don't know how I come up with that. And I kept rereading it because it felt so good to reread it.
Yeah.
And I had no training with that, it was just sitting and writing my thoughts and, just thinking, okay, well, what would Blaine say or what would my guide say about this? And just writing whatever came to mind. And it
Yeah.
seems like it's a tool that's, yeah, not, I guess people don't take it they take it for granted, I guess,
Oh,
is what,
yes, for sure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And, it's actually one of the first, I guess, ways that I really dived into mastering my intuitive abilities, was writing. I journaled as a kid. I didn't realize what I was doing back then, but once I started, even in 2020, I started journaling every day. I just felt very compelled to be mapping all this out. Um, and then I would go back and read them, and I'm like, yeah, this is like the answers, like you said, it just kind of came out through me. And so, yes, I tell people like it's very easy. If I'm like, if you want to really tap into, the divine or your guides, automatic writing or scribing is the best way to start. It doesn't take any skill set or knowledge. You just start writing and it will come. It flows through you, like you said earlier, with finding something you're passionate about just starts to flow.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So amazing. So tell people a little bit more about how they can work with you and what you have to offer as far as resources.
Yeah, of course. So I have a website, so it's lightandbreezycoaching.com. So everything you could possibly find about me is going to be on there. I have two books on Amazon, but I have one on healing frequencies and how to use them. A very easy reference guide. It's called Healing Frequencies Made Easy. I always recommend that to people because we're using frequencies a lot more to heal, but a lot of people don't know how or what frequency to tune in for. So I have it sorted by like your symptom. So you can look up what your actual symptom is. Cause I have so many frequency guides, and my mom will call me almost every day and she's like, what do I set it for this? She's got a frequency generator. I have one over
Oh,
there, but
cool. Yeah.
and so she'll call me every day. So that's actually why I wrote the book, was for my mother, because she would call me and I'm just like, it would be so much easier if I just could give her this. And so that's a great way to start with the healing stuff. But yes, I have workshops on my website. I do a lot of quantum healing. So I do Metronia. I'm a master Cosma teacher. So a lot of quantum. So I always tell people, I'm like, the best thing is book with like the signature service, and I can do that all remotely. But I can kind of talk to you about what it is you're experiencing, where you're struggling, where you feel blocked, whatever. And then I kind of curate a healing package for that particular person. So it gives you it's not just a blanket, oh, I'm going to get Reiki, or I'm going to get Metronia, or I'm going to get a Cosma. I can kind of curate it to what I see in your field. And so yeah, that's always my recommendation for people to start when they want to work with me.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So if someone's really feeling called to work with you, you talk about putting this package together. Um, then what would be the next steps? Like, do you have classes and that sort of
Yep,
thing?
I've got online workshops right on my website. So I have
Okay.
self-paced ones on positive thinking, abundance, mindset. I have a spiritual boot camp, so I talk very deeply about basically what we just talked about. I just really deep dive into frequencies, frequency planes, vibrational planes, the quantum fields, how that all ties into spiritualism, all that. And then I do online workshops as well, which you'll find all that on my website. So, yep, lightandbreezycoaching.com.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we didn't get to talk about? Maybe leave some advice?
Yeah. Well, advice. I'm gonna beat a dead horse. Start journaling. Please start journaling. It's the best thing. And not only that, I have a book here my daughter just recently gave me, and I want to kind of tie up a few things we were talking about, but she just gave it to me a few days ago, and it says, A Mother's Life, I Want to Know Everything About You. And it's this journal that has everything about me. And I mentioned to my mother that my daughter gave it to me, and she's like, oh, your sister gave me one of those. I'm not going to do that. And this is what I mean by like, don't be afraid to dive into those past questions. That
Mhm.
is where your healing is going to come from. It's past, it's gone. It's can be a painful experience, but that's how we shed it out of our energetic fields. And so you have to kind of go back. And I always tell people, like, if you want out, you got to go in. And going in is releasing these things that have haunted you. And, so write your story, write it like with compassion and, forgiveness, but acknowledge it. You can't suppress that. It's who you are today, and it's going to make you the most beautiful version of you, because even though things might seem like it was bad at the time, it creates a beautiful version of you down the road. And so you need those experiences, and so give those, even what we would consider a negative experience, give it love and grace, because it's the reason why you're so strong, why you're so powerful, and why you're going to become this badass down the road, or if you don't feel like you're there yet. But I always tell people, I'm like, that's what you're going for. I hate using this, but God gives his toughest warriors the toughest battles.
Mhm.
There's a lot of truth to that, because we go through these pressure cookers as children, or young adults, or in our past, because it's creating a version of you that this world needs. And every person has that destiny in them. There's not, I read Akashic records, I've never seen one person that I looked at their Akashic records and was like, nope, you have no destiny, right?
Yeah.
Everybody is here with a purpose. And so if
Mhm.
you really want to embody the best version of yourself, don't be afraid to go back and look at those things that may feel painful, but releasing that is you doing yourself a huge justice, so don't
Yeah.
be afraid of it. Fear is the only thing that limits us, and the only thing to fear is fear itself. It's so true. If you release fear, which I know can be scary for people, but if you really release it, that is the key to the next step. It's just, don't limit yourself by your own cage that we create by living in these past experiences. Dive into it, like look at it like, anything that you would want to overcome, and, don't shy away from it, or like, oh, I can't look at that. Dive in.
Yeah. Yeah. What great advice. Great advice. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I
Yes,
really
thank
appreciate
you.
it. Yeah. Yeah. And I know people are going to find this helpful in a lot of ways. So I encourage them to go and check out all your resources, your books. I'm definitely getting the book on the frequencies. I want that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I have a blog. I talk a lot on there too about I do it like energetic forecasts. Like I said, I'm an astrologer, so I
Okay.
do post on things like the Schumann, if that's going, or just a lot of different things I deep dive. So there's a lot of resources on my website that you can find, and I have where you can direct message me right on it. So if you have any questions, you can message me.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for listening, and bye for now.